and basically how they live with art. This is an attempt at simulating a private collection visit. And I don't know how common it is for people in Taipei, for collectors to open up their homes to, say, museum groups or VIP guests of art fair. But that's a very common practice, for instance, in New York, and maybe to a lesser degree in the major art centers in Europe. And basically that's how I got my education in collecting. I think that you get to learn a lot when you visit other collections. You get inspired what some amazing people have done. You get new ideas about new directions to pursue, and sometimes you also see things that you don't want to do, and I think that's also pretty critical. The reason we didn't open up shop in New York, even though we are basically based there, is obviously because there was no need for a collector space in New York. If somebody wants to find out how to collect, there are so many resources there. There are so many established collections, both on the private side and the public side, that one can visit and understand what a collection can be about. When I moved to London 4.5 years ago and started visiting Istanbul more often, which is the place where I was born, I was very impressed by the energy in the city, in the art scene. There was a lot of interest in collecting, and the commercial engine was churning very efficiently. But one of the issues that was quite obvious is that there weren't that many reference points in terms of collecting. There have been collections, very good collections, that have started a while ago, but there are very few, I would say, at least compared to the major art centers in the world. And the reality is that it takes time to build a collection. You cannot rush it. I know that there are individuals and institutions across the globe who are trying to run this marathon like a sprint, but I have my doubts in terms of how successful of a collection they'll be able to put together in a compressed amount of time. So we thought that Istanbul would be a good place to start our initiative. So we set up shop in this little location. And I'll now talk about the physical space that we occupy in Istanbul and how that fits our conceptual model, to give you a sense of why we chose that particular space. First of all, the type of building. It is, the space itself is within a residential building, and actually the space was part of the living area of a private residence. We have kept the original flooring, and you even have to enter through the main door of the building to get to our to the door of our space. So it does have this private feel, but on the other hand, it has glass walls on two sides, and one of them actually faces the street, so anyone passing by can take a peek into this space. So it plays with the tension between private and public, which we really like and we want to emphasize. And it's one of our goals to make the walls of private collections a little bit more transparent, a little bit more porous, so that they have an interaction with the public. Now, the second property of the location is its size. It's about 20 square meters, which is probably about the size of the stage. So that puts a lot of limitations on what we can do in a space of that size. And actually we have, acted a little bit more ambitiously and divided it into two areas. We have the exhibition space in front of the location facing the street, and in the back we have a resource library. So it's actually a smaller space where we can exhibit artworks. Probably, because of this restriction, but also in a way that we have justified it to ourselves later on, we have chosen to exhibit a single artwork from the collection. And for me, at the beginning at least, that was a little bit of a non-intuitive move, because I think that a collection tells a story or multiple stories as a whole. And restricting it to a single artwork probably is the opposite of what we want to do. We always want to think about the context and how one artwork relates to the others. But on the other hand, it also liberated us from a lot of the constraints that trying to show a collection in its entirety would have put on our shoulders. Basically, it becomes a curatorial decision to make a selection from a collection. And when you make a selection, you bring your own reading to it. And clearly, different curators would come up with different readings, and that was not our point. That's not what we wanted to do. Our goal was to talk about collecting and the collecting style of particular collectors. And maybe more important than that, we wanted to emphasize that even though our focus is on collecting, everything actually starts with the artwork. That's the primary source of what we are engaged in. So by basically doing a solo show of an artwork, we were putting the spotlight on it, and I thought that that was the right thing to do. And for us, it's always a reference point. We discuss with the collector which piece to select from the collection. It typically has a relevance for the collection and also for our space and for Istanbul. So we do get to play with some curatorial ideas which we find interesting. And the third property of our space is its location. We are on the edge of Taksim Square, and if you have been to Istanbul, you know that that's one of the central squares in Istanbul, maybe the central place. It's where all demonstrations start or end. There are always tons of people who aggregate there, and there's a lot of foot traffic. So even though our space is tiny and we can fit maybe 2 or 3 people in it, our audience is actually much bigger because we look towards the square and the square looks back at us. So in a sense, we may have a very big exhibition space. It also turns our exhibitions into sort of a quasi public art project, which I enjoy a lot because I think public art is the way to go. We get to touch people who typically don't have the opportunity or the time or the resources to visit museums and or galleries, and this way they get to see a pretty significant artwork that otherwise wouldn't be available to them. There is a shuttle service right in front of us, and typically there's a queue in front of it. And we provide entertainment for people waiting in that queue, and most people don't really notice what we are doing, but some do, and we do get engaged in some conversations, which we find very satisfying. Now let me go to our stated objectives when we applied for our nonprofit status. And well, the first one is bringing significant artworks in private collections to public view. And that's probably our most noble objective, and that's probably why or how we got that tax-exempt status. I actually, when I visit private collections, I'm always amazed how much of the significant artwork that is recently produced is in those collections. I think museums can only afford a tiny proportion of those works that are produced. So a lot of them are housed in those private collections away from public viewing. Eventually, over time, the hope is that they do end up in museums, especially the most important ones. But I think that process also takes a while, especially now that private collectors are not that eager to donating artworks to museums. They have different plans, typically. And I do feel that it is important for artworks to meet the public as quickly as possible so that it can leave an impression and can have an impact. I think that would satisfy artists more, an assumption, and fulfill the potential of the artwork by influencing other things that might follow, rather than having it in storage or at the corner in some living room where it doesn't get seen. I think artworks would be happier if they meet the public a little bit earlier in their lifetime. That's my attitude towards it. But frankly, there are more established ways of bringing artworks in private collections to public spaces. Obviously, collectors loan the artworks to museums and institutions, and that's the more efficient way, probably. They also open up their own spaces in many countries. That's including Turkey, including Istanbul. That's a very prevalent practice nowadays. So us doing it one by one from each collection is probably not going to change the course of this practice. But on the other hand, again, we have this public art type of situation where a lot of people get to see it. So maybe in that sense, it's good that many people who wouldn't be able to see the works in a museum because they are protected behind walls may get to see those works pretty early on in their life cycle. The second objective that we stated is opening up private collections to critical review, and that's what intrigues me personally most. I've said this many times. It boggles my mind a little bit that there are no academic requirements, no testing or licensing requirements for becoming a collector. There's no real apprenticeship. And there's also no mechanism of receiving objective feedback on your practice. In everything else that we do seriously, where we put a lot of effort and time and money, there is typically a review process. There is a boss or there is a reviewer somewhere that gives you feedback, and you can learn from it, and others reading the review if they have access to that, can learn from it. And that's how things get better, in my opinion. It's very difficult to be critical, especially in terms of a collection, when you are looking at your own collection. When you visit another private collection, it's much easier to think about some issues more objectively, and then if you can relate that to your own practice, I think that's where the benefit comes in. I also have a little bit of a problem, collectors thinking that they have the license to do anything they want with the artworks that they own. It's bought with their money for sure. I mean, I have nothing against personal property, but I do think that collectors have some responsibility against the artworks, against the artists, and against the society at large. So we would like to emphasize those points at Collectorspace. And we try to do that through our little publication, which is right here, not glossy. We try to stay away from shiny objects. We also don't do champagne openings, because I think that part of collecting is well covered in other places. So in this publication, it's a long shot, but what we do is we commission a text by an independent writer to go and visit the collectors, see the collection, and write a text. I don't know if we'll be successful in actually creating a platform for a serious critical review of private collections, but we are happy to even talk about such a concept. And if people have a problem with it, that's fine, but we can discuss that, and hopefully even that will move us a little bit forward. And frankly, this part of the program is geared towards the global art community, not just Istanbul or wherever we open the next collector space, because I think this piece is missing everywhere, including the major art centers in the US and in Europe. And the third stated objective is providing resources to current and future collectors, which is the more basic function that we have, or we would like to have. It's interesting that even if you are in London, New York, Shanghai, I assume, or Beijing, it's not that easy to find information about how to go about collecting. It's nice to go to galleries and acquire some works, or visit art fairs and pick up the works, but then you have to work to deal with issues like insurance, transportation. Once the collection gets bigger, you have to deal with storage and preservation. So there are lots of topics involving the infrastructure of collecting.